So, welcome back to the second half of the morning session. We've had some really good speakers here this morning and really interesting. I think they just get better and better, and if you think the last two were good, you wait till you hear this guy. He really pumps you up. We're now going to welcome Peter Johnson back to PEI. Wheat Pete is the resident agronomist with Real Agriculture, where he posts a weekly podcast, Wheat Pete's Word. He's a regular on Agronomy Monday on Real Ag Radio, Sirius Radio, Satellite Radio 147. Peter spent 30 years as the Ontario seed cereal specialist and loves to talk anything agriculture, especially wheat. He leads the Middlesex Soil and Crop Improvement Association's Applied Research Program, is the environmental advocate for the Land Improvement Contractors of Ontario, and is a member of the Ontario Compaction Team. He was named as one of the top 50 in Canadian agriculture in 2021, inducted into the Middlesex County Agriculture Hall of Fame in 2022, and named as the honorary president of the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association for 2024. Along with all that, Pete does find time to operate a small farm near Lucan, Ontario, where he constantly tries out new production ideas, and exactly this is where the rubber hits the road, as he says. He is enthusiastic and passionate about agriculture and loves to be challenged by a grower. Please welcome Wheat Pete.
Well, thanks very much. And two things, I got to change that bio because there's way too much malarkey in that bio. Lord help us, it's got to get shorter than that. And did you guys not know that you never applaud for a speaker till they're done? Because you have no clue if they're any good or not, for crying out loud, right? Like it's. What's that? Exactly. That's a good thing, Peter. If you don't applaud, that's okay. So thanks very much for having me. It's awesome to be back on the island and talking about wheat. And I will note that Dr. Sikkema, in his presentation, all he talked about was useless corn and soybeans, right? Like nothing about the real crops at all. So just got to pick on him a little bit. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm a guy that lives on feedback. So when I'm done, if you would, as I go through, I'm happy to take questions as I go through. So don't wait till the end. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'd say throw your water at me, but they're all in cups, so it's not a water bottle. So, but just ask away. I'd just really rather have the engagement as we go. And if at the end of it, you say, that guy, I just got to tell him how full of crap he is, my contact information is all there, and I live on feedback. So tweet me, text me, email me, whatever, and I will do my best to respond, and we can have a conversation. So let's go. 30 seconds of shameless self-promotion. I do, as was in my bio, the weekly podcast called Wheat Pete's Word. I work with Real Agriculture to do that. They're an awesome organization, and so really enjoy working with them. And we hit episode 500 2 weeks ago, so that's like, I've been doing it way too long, right? I should have retired ages ago, but it's fun, so I keep doing that. We also do these schools. And anybody, like, you guys like farm shops? Come on, you're all farmers. You love shops, right? If you go to the Real Ag shops, and you look up Cadillac Farms, so Cadillac is K-A-D-Y. Anybody watch that video? Yeah, I see a couple of hands. That shop is just unbelievable, eh? Oh my gosh. So if you want to have a bit of fun, look up Real Ag Shops and Cadillac Farms. It's really, really interesting. And then, of course, we do the agronomists. So that's another thing that we do every Monday night. And Ryan has been on the agronomists, and I think it's a good program. We try to get one Eastern and one Western agronomist every Monday night. And we cover a particular topic. And it's just a whole bunch of fun. And that's live, so you can go on there and ask questions in the chat. Okay.
Of America, it's an amazing place. And you know what I've come to realize, right? Americans, you basically do everything that we do, but you do it bigger and you do it better. Like, we have stupid people here, but your stupid people are world class. And that is not me saying, oh, all Americans are stupid. No, America also has the smartest people on the planet. What I'm saying is that when America does stupid, you do stupid. Like, our village idiot is in a park shouting at clouds. Yours is president.
I couldn't resist, right? Start off with a little bit of humor. So let's have some fun as we go through. And this, by the way, is not at all to do with wheat production, but I typically start with something that's a little bit more just to get your mindset around what agriculture does. So I don't believe I've shown this slide in PEI before. What do you see when you look at that graph? Just so you can look at it too, Robert. What do you see? Farmers doing a better job. Okay, Eric, absolutely. What else do you see? Sorry, Peter?
Land use pretty constant.
Land use pretty constant. What else? Somebody was... production's gone up and land use is going down. Land use isn't going down. It's gone up slightly, right? So I'll see if I can make this, but land use, right? We're 10% more land. The population is 2.6 times, and food production, and this was in 2020, was at 3.9 times production. So we're about 4 times the production now on 10% more land. And so the reason that I show this is because agriculture is one of mankind's greatest success stories. And one of the challenges in agriculture, and you may not feel it as much on the island as I do in Ontario, because Ontario is Canada's California, and all we ever hear about is how bad agriculture is. You know, I mean, gosh, I talked about it on this week's episode of The Word about glyphosate in the water. And they did the calculation, and if you drank 2 liters of water per day, you were getting 1/4 of 1% of the maximum allowable limit of glyphosate. Meanwhile, if you ate 1 green potato, you would get way more than 1/4 of 1% of the amount of solanine that would kill you. And it's risk versus reward, and we don't get to talk about that. But agriculture has done a terrible job of actually talking about the success story that it is. And this graph is from the OECD, and I think it gives you that story. So when you guys, jump on the plane and head to Mexico, and you're on the beach with some person out of Boston, this actually happened to be a couple of years ago, and they start talking about how horrible agriculture is for the glyphosate and the nitrogen in the water and the phosphorus in the water and all those things, you can at least say, number one, what's your first thing when somebody says attacks agriculture? What's your first thing that you say? An absolute must. Stop eating? No, if you say stop eating, you have lost that individual. They will not listen to you at all. You have to engage with the public in a manner that they feel like you are listening to them. And so the first thing you have to say is, wow, I hear your concern. Can you articulate it just a little better so you know exactly what their concern is? And once you say, I understand your concern and I agree that we have to do better, now you've engaged them and now you can actually make headway. So they beat up in you on glyphosate and you say, I understand that you're concerned about glyphosate, and you move from there. But this chart in particular, because everybody now wants to get back to nature. We want to go organic. And there's nothing wrong with organic production as a production system if you can make more money out of it. But when you look at this chart, what do you notice at 1960? What happened in 1960? Sorry? Yeah, so, and Eric mouthed it, it's the Green Revolution. It's a Green Revolution, which was better genetics, pesticides, and fertilizers. So before the Green Revolution, all of this work that Dr. Sickmas talked about this morning about the benefit, the economic benefit of herbicides, there were no herbicides. So you suffered that yield loss because you couldn't get rid of those weeds, right? And if you look at that chart, what's really interesting to me is everybody wants to get back to the way it used to be. Well, back to the way, oops, sorry, the wrong one. There we go. Back to the way it used to be is here. Did we produce more food? The answer is yes. We produced more food. How did we do it? We farmed more land. Did the population grow? Yes. Those lines are still there. They exist from 1800 right up until 1960. They are right on top of each other. 1960, the world changed, and it changed because of modern agriculture. And with modern agriculture, we now feed way more of the world's people. Before 1960, 1 person in 3 was food insecure. Today, 1 person in 10 is food insecure. By the way, 10% of the world's population being food insecure is still way too many people. And we've got enough food. It's a distribution thing. It's an economic thing. But if we didn't have modern agriculture, 1 person in 3 would still be food insecure. And that is where you can resonate with the people sitting on the beach in terms of how agriculture has had a positive impact. And the other part of that story is that the public focuses not on this incredible success story, 4 times the production on basically the same land, but they focus on the small unintended consequences. And nitrogen in the water going down the Mississippi and creating a dead zone in the Gulf of, what did Steve call it? The Gulf of, oh yeah, the Gulf of America, right? Isn't it the Gulf of America? Anyway, but like that is an unintended consequence. And we have to own that and we have to fix it. But this success story is incredible. And I bet that 90% or more of you in the room didn't even realize what a success story agriculture is. And we don't talk about it. And that's why we only talk about the unintended consequences. So there's my little segue for the day, because I think it's incredibly important that we know this stuff and that we're able to discuss it in an intelligent way when we're talking to other people. So here's just one other thing, because I'm a wheat guy, and this is from Bob Nielsen, used to be the corn specialist at Purdue University. And this is the corn chart. It's exactly the same thing. The only difference that I want to point out on this particular chart is here, because the great promise of biotechnology was that it would increase yields. Biotechnology actually didn't increase yields at all, because if you go back here, when we had open pollinated corn, we made 0 yield gain, 0 progress that whole time. We got hybrid seed corn, and we started, the slope of that line is a 0.8 bushel per acre year yield increase. We add the rest of the green revolution, the pesticides and the fertilizers, it's 1.9 bushel per acre yield gain. All biotechnology did was allow us to maintain that line. It did not change the slope of the line. So I'm a wheat guy, and I often hear, oh man, we need biotech wheat. We don't need biotech wheat. I mean, there'd be some nice things about biotech wheat, particularly if we could take some of the things out of it that cause celiac disease. If we could take those particular proteins out, which is possible, and at least we think it's possible, we're working on it, but from a productivity standpoint, biotechnology did not bring nearly as much to the table as we thought. Okay, so how many people in the room are getting higher yields? Higher yields than you did 10 years ago. Okay, if you're a farmer and you didn't put your hand up, if you're not getting higher yields than you did 10 years ago, you won't be farming 10 years from now. It's just the way it is. And so where does that come from? Where do higher yields come from? Genetics? Yep. Management? Yep. Genetics and management. Would you agree? And so I love this graph. And this is actually from a Colorado study and published in 2022. And I cherry-picked this one because I'm an agronomist. And in this particular chart, the red lines or the red bars are the yield increase due to genetics. And in this study, it was only 13% of the total yield gain. And I pick it because I'm an agronomist, not a breeder, and my genetics people, my breeder friends, just hate this particular chart because they think they're doing more than the agronomy part, and they actually are. But the red is the genetics, the yellow is the agronomy. What's the green? Exactly. So the green is climate. And so of the yield gain that you are getting, and we all think that we're doing a wonderful job, and we are, but 50% of that yield gain is actually coming from the changing climate. And so that's why I say, even if you don't buy into better genetics and you don't buy into better agronomy, if you're one of those people, if you're not getting higher yields, the climate is giving you better yields. If you're not getting higher yields, you are not going to be farming into the future. This is a really interesting thought process, that it's not everything we do, that things are actually changing around us, and those things that change around us, we need to be aware of because they change the management that you apply as you go forward. So, sunlight, right? Water, carbon dioxide. That's what you do as a farmer. You take sunlight energy, you take carbon dioxide and combine it with water to make carbohydrates. When we look at that and you say, where is the climate changing and what's happening from an agronomy standpoint, solar brightening, this work by Thijs Tollenaar, used to be at University of Guelph, he's now retired. He actually worked at Florida State, I think, when he did this work, and then California. But solar brightening is responsible for 27% of the yield gain that you are getting. 27%. How many farmers in the room are using sulfur on their crops where they did not 10 years ago? Yeah, me too. And the reason, or one of the reasons that solar brightening is a real thing, is because we've cleaned up the particulate matter out of the environment. And one of those particulate matters is sulfur. So as we've taken the sulfur out of the air that used to fertilize our crops, now we have to buy the sulfur, but it allows the sunlight to be brighter. And it's not the only reason. It's been solar flares, the sun, that we're just getting brighter sunshine, but 27%. What about carbon dioxide? What's happened to carbon dioxide in my lifetime? What do you think? How much has it gone up? A lot, right? Because I'm an old guy, right? So it's gone up a lot. And the answer is, so we're now at 415 parts per million. When I was born, it was at 315 parts per million. Now, if you really want to know how old I am, you can go back and see when it was 315 parts per million and figure that out. But percentage-wise, right, that's like a 33% increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And one of the things that carbon dioxide does is it does increase yields, we get that, but the thing that we don't often think about is that with higher carbon dioxide levels, crops become more drought tolerant. In particular, the C3 crops, soybeans and wheat, and barley and potatoes. How many potato farmers, by the way, in the room? Oh yeah, half of you don't want to raise your hand. You're just scared to. I'm going to pick on you. Absolutely I am. Anyway, that's a 33% increase, so that's higher yields. But more drought tolerance is really quite important, because as we continue down the road of more severe weather events, when the rain comes, it's heavier, but the interval in between, when we don't get rain, tends to be longer. We get those short-lived droughts, so better drought tolerance becomes a pretty important thing. But at the end of the day, it becomes all about the water. And water use efficiency is really what we have to start focusing on, because that is what is going to drive the whole process. When we look at the yen, and so I know most of you are familiar with the Maritimes yen, I don't have to talk about yen. When we look at the Great Lakes yen, which is our program in the Great Lakes area. And these graphs, the green bars are the top 20% of producers. The blue bars are the bottom 20% of producers. So that's how we've looked at the data. And as you look across all those different environmental factors, what's really interesting is that, you know, solar radiation is the same, interception of solar radiation is the same, all of, like, pretty much everything is the same. The big difference is that estimated use of water. So you want to grow better wheat here in the Maritimes, you got to figure out how to make use of that water better. And man, it's one of the things when Aaron talks about the yen this afternoon, or whenever Aaron, maybe Aaron, you already talked about the yen this afternoon, and he talks about rooting depth. And man, the roots on your wheat crops in the Maritimes are brutally shallow. Like, I can't believe, I think 16 inches on average, you said, Aaron. Like, how do you improve that? How do you get that better water use efficiency? And part of it may well be that your stupid potato production, you compact the soil so doggone much that the roots can't grow any deeper. I know, Ryan, you don't want me to hear that, but yeah. So by the way, who holds the record for creating the most soil erosion in the world? Who holds the record? And by the way, what is the most soil erosion? Like, what causes the most soil erosion? Sorry? Water? No. Anybody else? Wind? Nope. Bingo. Who said tillage? I don't know, whoever. If I had a prize, I'd give you. So tillage erosion is 10 times worse than wind and water erosion combined. And potato production holds the record. In a single season, potato production can move soil down slope 21.8 meters. That's 70 feet. And it just goes like, why do you have shallow roots? I think I know. Anyway, I'm beating up on the potato guys, but this is, you want to grow better crops, this is one of the things that you actually have to look at. So a bunch of fun from that perspective. Let's talk about wheat now. I'm moving on. All right, where do we grow the highest wheat yields in the world? I've shown some of these slides before. You should know this answer. Where do we grow the highest wheat yields in the world? England. Where else? New Zealand. Where else? Australia. No, very low yield, man. Very low yield. Super dry climate, no irrigation. So actually, those are the two places. Why is it always England or New Zealand that we get the highest wheat yields? Sorry, Surrounded by water, exactly. Oftentimes people say, oh, England gets more rainfall. England's actually a pretty dry climate. They get 24 inches of annual precipitation. How much annual precipitation does PEI get? Yeah, 38? Is that the number? I don't know. I didn't look it up. I know Ontario is 35. I'm quite sure you're more than 24. 40? Sure. Whatever the number is. So it's temperature, temperature, temperature. If you're surrounded by water, the water moderates temperature. What is Prince Edward Island? An island. What are you surrounded by? Water. Why are you growing such crappy wheat? It doesn't make sense. So I really want to challenge you. I'm quite sure you can do better. And I think you are doing better, and that's awesome to see. But I think the opportunity exists. So how good can wheat be? So this is Tim Lamyman. He is now the world record holder. He grew 267.8 bushels per acre. I'm on the island. I think your tons per acre, that is 7.3 tons per acre. I don't know, can you guys hit 7.3 tons per hectare? It's like, isn't that incredible? So the yield potential is amazing. He did it on 1.05 pounds of applied nitrogen per bushel. It's an incredibly low rate. when you think about your nitrogen applications, how much nitrogen are you applying? How do you make that decision? What's your nitrogen use efficiency? That's quite amazing. And the wheat on that field, if I recall correctly, came out at just about 12% protein on 1.05 pounds per bushel of nitrogen. Quite incredible. What does he credit? Roots. The first thing he credits is roots. So again, this shallow rooting depth is really kind of intriguing. Yes? He's on worse soil than he is on PEI. I can't answer that. I've never been on his farm, but I'll take your word for it, because I know the soils on Prince Edward Island are gorgeous, right? They're these gorgeous sandy clays that just are highly productive. Yeah, interesting. He has a neighbor, by the way, that often rivals Tim for yield. He doesn't beat him, but he rivals him. But his neighbor says, if I want to grow my best yield wheat, I actually have to grow it on my highest elevation farm, because highest elevation are cooler temperatures. So even in the UK, those temperatures are what is driving that root or that yield process. And the other thing he credits is stay green. And man, we have not talked about stay green and wheat like very much at all. Our breeders don't do much on stay green. There's one wheat variety in North America that I'm aware of that Colorado State bred, that they bred for stay green. And it's typically in the top 3 of all the variety trials in Colorado. So stay green, what is stay green, by the way? What does stay green mean? Health of the plant, when? At harvest, right? So it's health of the plant later in the grain fill period, later in the growth of the plant. And stay green is a big deal. All right, we're going to grow better wheat. We have to understand a bit more about wheat, the critical periods in wheat production. So what is the most critical period in a wheat crop's life from a yield perspective? What's the most critical period? What do you think? Oh, come on, just yell it out. Everybody's scared to death because I'm such a toad at the front, right? Anytime? Heading time. Yeah, so heading time is, but what's really interesting is that it's a wider window than we actually thought. So it's a period from about 2 weeks before heading to 10 days after heading. So it starts about second node, growth stage 32. And that is much earlier than we originally thought. We sort of thought that it was like corn, it was more about tasseling, and I know Tony will talk about this, or he may talk about this after as well, but it's earlier, and you need to have that plant at maximum photosynthetic capacity from second node till 10 days after anthesis if you're going to get maximum wheat yields. So from a management standpoint, you have to change your mindset to get there. And it takes the whole production system. I mean, gosh, if you don't have enough, if you don't use enough seed, trying to manage around this critical period is going to fail. You still have to have the plants there. You have to do things right. But this particular period is where your management needs to be at its maximum. And up until, I don't know, 5 years ago, perhaps here, 10 years ago in Ontario, people didn't manage the wheat crop past growth stage 32. They put it in the ground in the fall, throw a bit of nitrogen on it in the spring, and expect it to yield like heck, and wonder why it didn't. So this focus on managing then is pretty important. So the other thing to remember is that, you know, there are environmental things that really come into play, and I'm not going to go through all of this stuff. I have a whole presentation on this. I think I gave it here a few years back. But these grain fill conditions are critical. If you set yourself up for high yield, you still need really good grain fill. You get about 660 growing degree days of grain fill, and the reason that they get high yields in the UK and New Zealand is because they get a 40-day grain fill. In Ontario, we get about 34 days of grain fill. Why do we get high yields in corn? Pardon? Heat? Think about this for a minute. From the time your corn tassels, pollinates, right? So just say tasseling, even though it hasn't quite pollinated then, till the time it's mature. How many days is that? Think about it in your environment. How many days is it? Any corn farmers? It's got to be 1 or 2 here. Sorry? 2 months. 60 days? Right. We get a 60-day grain fill period, because that's what grain fill is. It's from anthesis to maturity. You get 60 days with corn, you get 200 bushel corn. This grain fill period matters. If you want to get higher yields, you have to figure out how to get a longer grain fill period. The more grain fill you can get, the more yield you're going to get. And you get up to 4 bushels per acre per day for every day that you can extend that grain fill period. So if you can get 2 more days, that's 8 more bushels. If you could ever get 5 more days, that's 20 bushels per acre. That's massive. So length of grain fill makes a big difference. Wheat is a cool season crop. And one of the things that I think, and this is way too busy slide, I actually should probably take the top chart out, but I just try to put it in perspective. Optimum temperature really matters. So optimum temperature is this column here, but just to put your brain around it, wheat is a cool season crop, all right? What is a perfect day in a wheat crop's life? It's not a trick question, it's on the slide. Wheat is a cool season crop. What is a perfect day in a wheat crop's life? 20 degrees? So actually a perfect day, and you're close. A cool season crop, perfect day is a daytime high of 18 degrees and a nighttime low of 10 degrees or slightly less. So if you could grow wheat where you always had every day at those temperatures, you would blow the doors off wheat yield. You would outdo the people in the UK and New Zealand. So I went to WeatherSpark. It's kind of a cool website, and you can pull things off. And so this is the high temperature and low temperature for Charlottetown, PEI, the month of June, and you can see the month of May, and you can also see the month of July. Are you a cereal climate or not? Absolutely, right? Because if we back up to this chart, oh, wait a minute, I'm going the wrong way. Oh, there we go. Got to go here. We back up to this chart, my optimum temperature is up to 25. I can go to 32, but man, I really would like it to stay in this 10 to 18, and 25 is a maximum. When I look here, man, even in July, the average temperature doesn't break 25 Celsius. I would die to have those conditions in Ontario. Well, maybe not, because we grow corn. But anyway, from a cereal perspective, this is a cereal climate, full stop. If you want to get a longer grain fill period, what are you going to do? You're going to have to figure out how to get that crop to pollinate earlier, to come to head earlier. Because when you look at that, right, if you could get it to head out on the, I'm in a little trouble. Anyway, yeah, on the 1st of June, your daytime high is 8, your nighttime low is 16 and 8. That's just about perfect. The more time you could get it to have grain fill in this period versus get it to have grain fill in this period, the higher yield you're going to get. So this temperature really drives it. And by the way, oh shoot, I didn't change that back to Celsius. I gave this presentation last in the US. You can tell that. So every day over 25 degrees Celsius during grain fill, you lose a bushel per acre per day. So getting this thing to be earlier makes a huge difference. And what's really interesting is oftentimes in Ontario, the varieties that yield the highest are the ones that are the earliest to head out. And that's because they start grain fill in a cooler period. All right, photosynthesis also matters. And so part of the reason that I'm showing you this is that from a management perspective, it's good if you can put the whole package together. So this is kind of cool stuff. It used to be that you couldn't get photosynthetic data very easily. There's a whole bunch of ways to get it now. But any solar panels on the island? So if you have solar panels, you have access to just go check out how the solar panel is doing in terms of generating electricity versus how it did over the long term generating electricity for the month of May, for the month of June. Because those are the months that really matter for winter wheat production. And so this is a great example because in 2015 versus 2016, this is and by the way, solar panels are not a one-to-one for photosynthetically active radiation, but it's a pretty good estimation. So in 2015, we had a cloudy June. In 2016, we had a sunny June. That happens to be a 23% increase in solar radiation in the month of June. Do you think that had an effect on the wheat yield? And the answer is absolutely. It just happens, these are provincial average yields. These aren't the best yields by any stretch, but it had a 23% difference in the wheat yield. A 23% difference in solar radiation was a 23% difference in the final yield on the wheat crop. So phenomenal how that all comes together. So photosynthetic rates count. So I know you're not a lot of corn guys in the room, but I find this phenomenal. For corn, what is the #1 factor driving corn yields higher in the last 15 or 20 years? And Tony gets the shot at me this afternoon if he disagrees, so that's okay. What do you think? So most of the genetics has bred in better stress tolerance in the late development of the crop. So this stay green concept. And so I said, right, we get this 3 bushels per acre per day. For every day we can stay green, we get better stay green. So what do you think of that wheat crop? Would you like to be in the field with the combine with that particular wheat crop? Because that wheat is 18% moisture. You want to combine it? How would the combine do? Yeah, I used to run a white 8700 combine, right? Brand new in 1985. It would get from here to about the back of this room and it would go whoop. I'd spend at least 2 days unplugging it and then maybe the wheat would be ready to go, right? Anyway, this particular grower, he listened to this guy called Wheat Pete and he said, man, if this stay green thing is real, we got to check this out. So he used not 1, but 2 fusarium fungicides, head sprays. He did the first one right at heading. He did the second one 10 days later. So he got this massive stay green effect. That's what the wheat crop looked like when he went to combine it. There's the combine. There's the yield monitor. What do you think? And no, he did not pull back on the stick in the combine to make the yield monitor go high. And yes, it was calibrated. And yes, this is the high in the field. The whole field didn't yield 240 bushels per acre. But he was driving the combine and he was at less than 1 mile an hour. It was an S780 or something like that. It was just a massive combine. And he just kept saying, there's something wrong with the combine. I have no power. Like no. And then he looked at the yield monitor and quickly snapped that picture. So the field averaged 157 bushels per acre. The other wheat in the area yielded somewhere around 110 bushels per acre. It's not a side-by-side, but this was by far his best wheat where he managed to keep that stay green. And so be careful with two fusarium fungicides. We now have this product called Miravis, which actually gives better stay green. and so you can do it maybe without 2 fungicides, but a busy slide again. Nonetheless, if you look over here, so this is the amount of greenness just at maturity, and if you look, we had much better stay green with the Miravis, and if you look at what it did to yield, we picked up 8 or 7 bushels per acre. So stay green absolutely matters. Okay. The other thing that stay green does is that it gives you a higher 1,000 kernel weight. Most of you get graded on test weight. Test weight is not a yield component, get over it. But it does give you, if you can keep it greener through grain fill, the main yield improvement you get is in 1,000 kernel weight. But 1,000 kernel weight adds yield. And again, this is just out of the N. The top 20% of the producers at 41 grams per 1,000 kernels, the bottom at 39, and that's just supporting that when we do that, we do make a difference. So you gain up to 3 bushels per acre per day for every day the plant stays green through grain fill. That's what the science says. All right, we're about here. So I'm just going to stop there and just poll you, because I was supposed to talk about growing great wheat in Prince Edward Island. So you tell me, what are your issues in growing better wheat on the island? What is the number one issue that you have to deal with? And we'll take the presentation wherever we want from there. What do you say? Oh, nobody wants to say anything. I'll keep talking if you don't give me, like, I got lots of stuff to talk about yet. What do you, like, is it, so, sorry? Genetics? Okay, so kick your breeders in the butt. From a genetic standpoint, I mean, it's a huge difference, but do your provincial testing and pick your best varieties and continue down that road. One of the biggest reasons, actually, I'll back up. What is one of the biggest reasons that you don't get better genetic gain in wheat, in varieties, in wheat varieties? What is one of the biggest reasons? Sorry? Not a hybrid? Yeah, actually, the fact that it's not a hybrid doesn't make as much difference as you would think. They're working on hybrid wheat, but wheat is already a hexaploid. There's already 3 different genomes in the wheat crop. We get the biggest bang for the buck in the diploids, from what we can tell. So you get a diploid, it's only 1 genome. In wheat, it's 3 genomes, and it seems like some of that heterosis is already built in because we have 3 genomes, right? There's the A genome, the B genome, the D genome. It gets a little complex. But hybrid wheat, would it bring something to the table? Yeah, but not as much as hybrid rye, and not as much likely as hybrid corn, right? Just not, it's not going to do as much, just the way that wheat is. The biggest reason we don't get better genetic gain is because too many people, North America wide at least, use this thing called farmer saved seed. If you use farmer saved seed, how much does the breeder make that bred that variety? 0. Why would you breed wheat when 80% of the sales are farmer saved seed? So you want to have better genetics, buy certified seed, and that will help. Hopefully on the island, I think most guys do buy certified seed. If they don't, I think Aaron's going to show you some data that you should, right? But anyway, very, very, very cool. What else is hitting you? Is it winter kill? So we did we did a similar presentation in New Brunswick, and in New Brunswick, the number one thing was winter kill. Full stop, winter kill. So if winter kill is your biggest thing, then we need to manage around winter kill. If it's not,
2.8% organic matter releasing nitrogen in that crop fill period. So 2.8% organic matter, nitrogen release.
so 2.8% organic matter, and that's too low? Is that what you're saying? Or what is the nitrogen release from 2.8% organic matter?
Holding on to the nitrogen with limited ability to do that and releasing it in the crop fill period.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is that you think nitrogen management is your key concern, because at 2.8% organic matter, like when you talk about nitrogen, how many people split apply nitrogen on their wheat crop? How many people do not? How many people grow wheat? Because I'm not getting many hands. Like, what are you listening to me if you don't grow wheat, for crying out loud? Anyway, so let's quickly go to the nitrogen stuff. Oh, so here, I'll stop here, just because I think this is really important. Phosphorus with wheat seed is one of the ways that you will grow better wheat in Prince Edward Island. And again, this is yen data. Yen data you always have to take a little bit with a grain of salt because it's not a direct comparison, but I could have put up my direct comparison data. It supports this 100%. What's really interesting in this data is that if you put that phosphorus in the furrow with the seed, you get higher yields than as if you broadcast that phosphorus. And if you don't use phosphorus at all on wheat, you are going to give up yield, right? Wheat is a phosphorus hog. When you plant wheat in the fall, there are 3 nutrients that matter. It's called phosphorus, phosphorus, and phosphorus, period. And so this in-seed placement, and by the way, and oops, sorry, I skipped past this slide. In the fall, if you want to grow better wheat, you plant earlier. And Eric and I have had this discussion. There are no substitutes, full stop. There's just no way that you can get better wheat if you don't plant early. And so if you're a potato grower and you harvest those potatoes late, and you end up planting your wheat on October the 15th on the island, you are setting yourself up for crappy wheat crop. Have a nice day. Now, you've got pretty productive land, so maybe you can mitigate some of that. Yes? Is there a correlation between planting date and heading date? The answer is absolutely. However, if I plant 2 weeks earlier in the fall, I don't get 2 weeks earlier heading date in the spring. So there is a correlation. If I plant 2 weeks earlier in the fall, I probably gain about 3 days, like it's about a 5-to-1 ratio. So 5 days earlier planting date in the fall gives me 1 day earlier heading. So I can advance my heading date. What's more interesting is that if I plant that 2 weeks earlier in the fall, I get a whole lot more tillers, right? And so we did this math with one of the yen growers. He farms in an area that would be a little bit longer season than Prince Edward Island, but not a lot. His optimum planting date is September the 20th. He was busy combining those useless soybeans. He kept combining the soybeans. He didn't plant the wheat until September the 29th. So that 9 days delayed planting. How much yield impact do you think that had on his wheat crop, or potentially had on his wheat crop? So the answer to that is that 9 days, we went and calculated, because he was really disappointed. He had 97 bushel per acre wheat, and he should be able to grow at least 110 or 120 bushel per acre wheat, right? So I know you're not bushel per acre people, that's the way my brain thinks, but regardless, he was disappointed. We calculated the heat unit accumulation from September the 20th to September the 29th, and that was 140 growing degree days. What is 140 growing degree days in a wheat crop's growth cycle? And the answer is it takes about 100 growing degree days to make an additional tiller. His yield was down because he didn't have a high enough head count. If you want to get big wheat yields in Prince Edward Island, unlike the UK and unlike New Zealand, and it's different there it's all about seeds per head. Our genetics don't have the capability to get a lot of seeds per head. It's just where we're at. The only way we can make that is heads per square foot, heads per square meter. Because he planted late, not really late, 9 days late, I mean, it was still beautiful weather conditions, the soil conditions were great. He gave up 140 growing degree days. He gave up 1.4 tillers per plant. That's 1.4 heads per plant. He had about 23 seeds per square foot, right? Like all of a sudden, we took his head count from 650 heads per square meter to 915 heads per square meter, and we took him from 97 bushel per acre wheat to 112 bushel per acre wheat. So this whole concept about tillering and tillering in the fall makes a massive difference. And I go there because when we look at this, if you put seed-placed phosphorus with your wheat, you will increase the rate of development in the wheat crop, and the data says that you will gain almost a full tiller per plant in the fall. Now that, I gotta be a little careful. If you plant on November the 15th, you're not going to get an additional tiller per plant with phosphorus in the seed trench, because you can't. You don't have enough heat there. But if you plant on time, that phosphorus in the seed furrow will speed the plant development, and you'll get more fall tillers, and fall tillers are what make yield. Okay, we'll skip this stuff.
Did he seed at the same rate at the later date?
So he seeded 1.6, the question is, did he seed at the same rate at the later date? So we would consider that he was still in the same window, like within the optimum planting date window. So he seeded at 1.6 million seeds per acre. What's really interesting, and so I'll hopefully get to that before I have 8 minutes, and I'll talk about why increased seeding rate late doesn't answer the problem. It simply doesn't answer the problem.
In absolute terms or to a lesser extent?
So, if I seed early, right? So the question is, what about seeding rate by seeding date? I should have put that I have that chart, I didn't put it in here. Great question. If I seed early and I drop my seeding rate, right? So I'm going to drop my seeding rate and I'm seeding early. So let's say I seed 500,000 plants per acre. That's quite a low rate, but just for purposes, right? 500,000 plants per acre, and I get 3 tillers, or 2 tillers rather, before, and so now I have 1.5 million heads. If I seed 3 weeks later, and I seed 1.5 million seeds per acre to get 1.5 million heads, the early seeded will still out yield the late seeded significantly. Because the early seeded, here, we'll go to that. Yeah, this is it here, actually. Oops, sorry. Shoot, I keep not going backwards. So, and this is why. So, we will just do the, oh no, wait a minute. Okay, no. I'm confusing you with too many things here. So just to show that this really does make a difference, this is the data. The heads per meter squared, the top 20% are at 870 heads per square meter. The bottom 20% are at 553. The average in the UK, like Tim Lamyman, if he has 600 heads per meter squared, he thinks he's got lots. We're not like that. We need more heads because we just can't get enough seeds. But to answer your question, if I look at seeding date, notice that the high yield growers are seeding about 6 days earlier on average than the low yield people, but notice that they're seeding about 15% less seeds per acre. And the reason that works is that when you go to an earlier seeding date, the wheat plant actually can sense that, and it changes the amount of heat, the growing degree day accumulation, this like a heat unit, or it changes the amount of heat that it needs to go through each stage of its life cycle. So when it goes from first node to second node, if I plant early, it will take 110 growing degree days. If I plant late, it will take 90 growing degree days. That's part of the reason why the late planted wheat actually catches up from a heading date perspective, because it takes less heat to go through each stage of its life cycle. If you think about that, in my 500,000 early seeded situation, every time it goes through a life cycle, it's taking 110 growing degree days to get through that life cycle, so it's utilizing more sunlight, it's storing more energy in the stem that it can then reassimilate and move to the grain. When I seed that 1.5 million late, I've got less in every stem to reassimilate and move to the grain, right? So does that make sense? Does that answer your question? There are no substitutes for early planting. It's just the way that it is. And so you're a potato producer. So here, I mean, there are lots of cool thought processes around how to do that. And you're all saying, oh, Johnson, you're like, how many times do you have to say plant early? Figure out how. I have a canola producer, spring canola producer rather, in Northern Ontario. He is planting his winter wheat between his 15-inch seeded canola rows in late June. The canola gets seeded in early May. He seeds his winter wheat in late June. The canola competes with it enough that it never really does a lot of development. He harvests the canola in September. The wheat is there, it's partially developed, it gets a little more growth in the fall. That grower at New Liskeard is getting 140 bushel per acre wheat. The guys that are seeding it after the canola harvest are getting 90 bushel per acre wheat. So figure out ways to do it. There are ways that you can do this that make really good sense. Eric?
Peter, just to help, that concept is there across all crops, annual crops, and it's called maturity compression.
Right.
And it's a great question, because on the island, I've been trying to get barley growers to plant in April when there's snow in the field, right? And I get laughed at because, oh, it doesn't make any sense. Let's wait till May and do some in June. Well, there's just no way that April planted will yield less than June planted barley. Like, it's the same with wheat.
Yeah, it's maturity compression, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so it is an important concept. So by the way, this just shows some of that as well. This radiation interception, and this is work by Emma Dielman. She was one of Dave Hooker's grad students. But if you notice, I mean, with wheat, you have to intercept all of the sunlight, or at least 90 to 95% of the sunlight by flag leaf stage. That is growth stage 39, that's that column. Where I have early planted wheat, I have 90% light interception. Mid to early, which is still in the right window, I'm at 89. When I go to mid-late, I don't build the canopy. I have shorter plants because I'm not, by the way, early planted wheat is always taller and always more lodging prone. So you're gonna have early wheat, you gotta manage it with seeding rate, and you have to manage your nitrogen rate and your growth regulators, because you have higher yield potential, but you're more lodging prone. So there is this other component to wheat that you need to be aware of. But this is fascinating stuff and just really cool. But the early planted plots always had a higher rate of grain fill than late planted crops. So the early planted crop is intercepting more sunlight, and there's something about that yield or maturity compression or something else that the plant is doing. So that's why you can never make up with late planted wheat by seeding a higher population. It just doesn't work. Cool. We're about here, and I'm about out of time. Oh, that should say Canadians. Again, I stole this from my other presentation. Do not tweet out that Wheat Pete says it is okay to drink and drive. Anyway, I didn't answer the nitrogen question, so if whoever that asked that, I couldn't see that person, but we can talk at lunch. Thank you so much for having me. I hope I've twisted your head a little bit sideways on some of this stuff. And whatever you do, grow great wheat.
Thanks very much, Pete, and the applause is much better for you leaving than when you come in, so I guess you did a good job.